Welcome to the NC Everything podcast. I'm your host, Curtis, and this is the bi-weekly show where I talk about everything that has anything to do with North Carolina. Thank you all for listening. I have probably a short one today. The subject of today's episode I couldn't find a whole lot on for obvious reasons, once you'll realize once I get into it. Before I do get into it, I know I've been accused of talking too much, but I do have an announcement to make. And it's maybe not a great announcement. I think this is going to be my last summer with the NC Everything podcast. I know I have a lot of really avid listeners, and I hate to leave you. And I'm not leaving you just yet, but I do want to put it out there. This show is probably going to wrap up pretty soon, and I'm going to do a final episode, and it may be a long one, it may be a shorter one. I'd like to hang around a little bit longer if I could, but I will do a final episode kind of explaining everything, but for the most part, it's been 5 years. It's been 5 really fun years, and it's getting to be a whole lot, and I think I may be ready to move on with a different chapter in life or do something else. And I personally, I don't think it'll be my last dose of social media, but I think it's time to switch gears and try something else. And I won't announce this at the beginning of every episode, but I will announce it more just to make sure everybody kind of gets the announcement. And again, it's not me trying to dump my listeners or anything. It's a personal thing, but it's on a good note. You know, when my parents died a few years back, I shut the show down before they died, to take care of that. This isn't a tragic situation. It's one of them things where I feel like it's time. But anyway, I don't want to drag that out. Again, I'll let you know when the final episode's coming out, and it probably won't be a content episode. It'll be a farewell or something like that. And I'll spend some time putting that together. It won't be impromptu. You know, I'll try to plan something out for my last episode. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the content. Today's episode, I'm covering Amos Owens. Amos Owens is a pretty famous moonshiner from North Carolina. There's several other famous moonshiners, which I'll actually kind of run a list down later. But Amos Owens is a pretty famous moonshiner. Now, there's moonshiners from Wilkes County, and there's actually one from down east I found out. There's a really famous one from Maggie Valley. But Amos Owens comes from Rutherford County. Wow, I've had trouble saying this before. Rutherford County. And if for some reason you've never heard of Amos Owens, maybe you've heard of the famous cherry bounce. But we'll get into it. I'll go through his life here. He was born around 1822, and he didn't really have any formal education, which isn't uncommon up in the mountains. He did have a few days of, the notes say a few days of organized schooling. And that's all I really got on that. But I'm kind of picturing this little mountain kid going to school for a couple of days and then deciding, no, I'd rather run through the woods and have a lot of fun than sit in class. You know, I think that's probably most kids' dream, even though it doesn't work out positively for a lot of kids. So around age 9, he got a job as a drawer of water. And the only thing I could figure is he worked around job sites, and his job was to draw water for animals and people to drink. Well, he did this for 13 years, and he saved all the money he could. And at age 23, he buys 100 acres on Cherry Mountain in Rutherford County. And almost immediately, he starts moonshining, making homemade brandy. And his moonshine wasn't just something fun. It became his essence. Moonshine defined him. In fact, it wasn't long after he bought the 100 acres on Cherry Mountain that he married a woman named Mary Ann Sweezy, and he paid the justice of the peace in his homemade brandy. By age 29, he had earned enough money moonshining that he bought the rest of Cherry Mountain. He also buys a single slave to kind of help him out in his moonshine business. And this is where he started kind of developing this drink that became known as Cherry Bounce. And I've never had Cherry Bounce. I'm not a big fan of cherries anyway, but it says that it's a liquor consisting of corn whiskey, cherries, and either sourwood honey or sugar water. Another source said it was a generous portion of his finest corn whiskey with a few dashes of sourwood honey and cherry juice. Well, not too long after he made Cherry Bounce and it started getting popular, he joined the Confederate Army and started fighting in the Civil War. He fought in the Battle of Bull Run and served in the 56th North Carolina Regiment. And eventually he was captured and was held prisoner in Union stockades. Now, during the war in 1862, Lincoln, he introduced a federal excise tax on distilled spirits. And it was really a way to raise money to pay for the war. Well, after the war, when Amos Owens got home, remember, he was held prisoner and he fought with the Confederacy for the whole war. You know, when he got home and he heard about this excise tax on distilled liquor, he swore he would never pay a single cent toward Lincoln's liquor tax, and he never did. Now, he was already pretty mad when he got home from the war because he was held prisoner where he nearly starved to death. Then he finds out about Lincoln's tax. He gets back home to Cherry Mountain and realized that the Union Army had raided his farm and freed his only slave, kind of tore his place up. So he's pretty pissed about that, but you would think this is the origin story of a villain, and he would go after the government, Bonnie and Clyde style or something. No, it sounds like he just kind of made do and continued to make his Cherry Bounce. And his Cherry Bounce got so famous that he became known as the Cherry Bounce King. And I had read about this early on in the podcast when I was doing some research on moonshining. But he would have a annual festival called the Cherry Bounce Festival, and it was on the second Sunday of June. And it included, what they say, as much food and cherry bounce as a person could consume for 25 cents. So for 25 cents, you go to this festival and eat all you want and drink all you want. And it wasn't just a bunch of mountain people sitting around eating and getting drunk. There were activities like boxing, dancing, gander pulling, and dog fighting. And I'm sure there was a lot of other activities going on. That was just a general sum of the party. And it says that after the Cherry Bounce Festival every year, Amos Owens would take the money he made from the festival and, of course, bury it in the ground. And Cherry Bounce kept getting more and more popular. Eventually, people from out of state, from all around the South, would come to North Carolina to get some of this Cherry Bounce. But with that kind of fame, there's also infamy. And, of course, the revenuers, they knew that Amos Owens was the Cherry Bounce King, and they were hell-bent on bringing him down. And it says that they were using all sorts of tactics to try to bring Amos Owens in. And he did in 50 years of moonshine, and he did go to prison 3 different times. It says he went to court 4 different times, so I'm assuming at least one time he was set free with maybe a slap on the wrist. Maybe that was the first time. But here's the thing about Amos Owens. He was a criminal by definition, but he was not. He wasn't an asshole. He was actually really known to be, and he's really known for being a delightful person and just funny and charming, great to be around. And I got a few anecdotes on that. So one day, 2 revenuers show up at Amos Owens' house, intended on arresting him for moonshine, of course. And before they took him, he offered them breakfast and a drink. And the story is that they turned down the breakfast, but they accepted some of the cherry bounce. So after a couple of rounds, it says one of the revenuers kind of disappeared out into the woods, and the other one passed out in his kitchen floor. And this would be a perfect time for Amos to escape or hurt these men, but he didn't. It said that Amos kind of hung out and waited for him to sober up and regain consciousness. And then they arrested him and took him to South Carolina, where he served 6 months in jail. And so I guess you could say he was a gentleman criminal. And reading through Amos Owens' story, it says that even men that came to arrest him, kind of enjoyed their time with him. They had a good time, I guess, apprehending him. Even judges, I think there was one judge, I don't know if his name is in here. Yeah. Judge Robert Payne Dick, apparently was pretty fond of Amos Owens. He was real jovial, even in the courtroom where he was being sentenced to go to prison. He was kind of would make jokes and get everybody laughing. And even the judge, was kind of amused by him. I don't think I have it in my notes, but at one point, the judge, maybe in this judge, kind of regretfully sentenced him to prison. He said, I hate that you can't do right. I wish you would, quit breaking the law so I could stop sending you to prison. Now, supposedly, Amos Owens retired at age 68 after his last time being in court for moonshining. That was the last time they know for a fact that he ever went to court for moonshining. Personally, listening to or reading the story of Amos Owens and his notoriety, I can't believe that he would have quit moonshining. And maybe he did. Maybe at 68, it was time to throw the towel in, but maybe he quit moonshining on a large scale. But after 50 years of moonshining, I just can't believe he just stopped just like that. But legend says he did stop at age 68, and Amos Owens died in 1906. I couldn't find anything on his death. I'm assuming his old age. He certainly wasn't gunned down by the FBI or anything like that. So I'm assuming he just kind of died of old age in his house up on Cherry Mountain. And that's all I could find after a couple weeks of research. That's really all I could find on Amos Owens. There have been some books written on him. I did not read them, although if I did, I may have had more information. But there's some more stuff out there on Amos Owens, but that's all I can find. Some other famous moonshiners from North Carolina was Marvin Popcorn Sutton from Maggie Valley. Popcorn, I covered him somewhere in the show, and I don't think it was my moonshining episode. Maybe it was, but I know I've covered Popcorn Sutton somewhere. And I've been to Maggie Valley several times, and I've drove past Popcorn Sutton's house. Willie Clay Call, he was known as the Uncatchable. I didn't see where he was from. I don't think I seen where. No, I think he was from Wilkes County. I don't know why I didn't write that down. Willie Clay Call from Wilkes County, he was the Uncatchable. Junior Johnson, a lot of people know, he started as a moonshiner and migrated into motorsports, becoming a NASCAR driver. His dad, for whatever reason, can't remember his father's name, but his father was also a very famous moonshiner. Alvin Sawyer, this one kind of threw me a little bit. There's a town, getting off track for a second, there's a town down east that's no longer there. It used to be called Buffalo City, and it's almost in the Outer Banks. And it was a lumber town, but apparently it was a moonshining hotspot down there. And I had talked about it in probably my moonshining episode, but it got so big they were shipping their moonshine overseas to other countries. So it's not uncommon to have moonshiners down east, but here in North Carolina, most of the moonshiners are from the mountains. Well, this guy, Alvin Sawyer, he was from Pasquotank County, and he was known as the Moonshine King of the Great Dismal Swamp. So I don't know if I'll cover him before I close the show out. I don't know which episodes I'm going to try to hit before I close the show out. But I would definitely do some more research on the Moonshine King of the Great Dismal Swamp, Alvin Sawyer. That sounds really interesting. Anyway, that's all I got for you. In regards to me shutting the show down, I haven't said in a long time, but feel free to write in at the nceverythingpodcast@gmail.com. During this show or after this show closes down, I will always be happy to hear from anybody about North Carolina. And I'll talk about this more probably in my farewell episode. But whether the NC Everything podcast is here or not, I definitely encourage everybody to learn as much about North Carolina, explore North Carolina, and really enjoy North Carolina. It is, in my opinion, I haven't been to every state in the union, but I would say that it's probably the greatest state in the union. I've traveled all over the Southeast, and I can't stay away from North Carolina for too long. I always come back home. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe if you like the show. Don't forget to write in. Let me know how you feel. Let me know what you think of the show. And I'll talk to you in a couple weeks.